Hello, I'm Charlie, and this demo tutorial is going to be on a Victorian literature review. So say we're doing some coursework and we've been set an essay title or a question: how did Charles Darwin influence Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland? So, you know, two texts here, On the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin and Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll. Both of these are massively influential texts. Now, for the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to pretend that Alice in Wonderland is the focus, and we've been asked a question that relates to, what do you think about it in light of Darwinism? So Alice in Wonderland will be the focus. So when I do text analyses, I take a macro to micro approach. So all that means is macro first, you step back, you check out what's happening at the time of the writing of this text. So for Lewis Carroll, what's going on when he's writing Alice in Wonderland? So yeah, let's look at that. 1860s England. Peak of the Victorian Age. Well, not the peak, that's debatable. But anyway, we're right in the middle of it, and there's a lot going on. It's a very pivotal time for England. So 3 points here: the Industrial Revolution. So loads happening in terms of industry. We've got mechanization, and basically humanity is getting more and more detached from the way our ancestors used to live. And we know it, we can feel it. We're getting further and further away from nature. Second point, Christianity. We've always had Christianity, I'm sure we always will. Everybody believes in God at this time. And that means everybody believes humanity is separate from the rest of nature. Literally, like on a spiritual basis. We're inherently created and we're destined to be different from nature. And then also the British Empire. So British Empire dominates half the planet, and we're everywhere, basically. English people especially are enjoying a sense of superiority and the idea that, you know, the power of humanity has no bounds, and, you know, we're meant to be rulers of the world, etc., etc. So yeah, that's the culture of Victorian England is a culture of superiority and centrism and detachment from nature. So Darwin publishes On the Origin of Species, 1859. It's probably the most famous biology publication of all time. I think it's in the syllabus now. I was taught it. You've probably been taught it. Yeah, it's if you don't know what it says, it's basically outlining the brand new theory that species evolved over time through adapting to their environment and mutating over millions of years, and that's how they've ended up the way they have today. If you went back in time, they'd be different. If you went further back in time, they'd be getting more and more simple, until theoretically everything began when it was bacteria. He releases this, and it sparks the greatest controversy, social controversy England has ever known, pretty much. We're still not done talking about it. It's quite funny, really. But anyway, Darwin basically challenges everything that Victorian society is based on. Core beliefs and values are sort of, the implications of Darwinism kind of contradicts them. So 3 points once again. Creationism, the Christian belief that all life was created by God in 7 days, as Genesis talks about in the Bible. Because obviously, if life evolved over millions of years, that kind of means God didn't do it. So then we've got anthropocentrism, which is just a fancy word for saying humanity is the center of the universe. Humanity is the most important thing. The universe revolves around humans. Because obviously, if Darwin's theory sort of says humans actually came from apes, and so what makes us different from any other animal. That's the argument. And then lastly, he challenged traditional beliefs in morality and purpose. So, Darwin's idea of nature is basically that it's a struggle for survival. That's his fundamental conception of it. You can understand why Victorians, after thinking for so long that nature was a sort of harmony, a kind of paradise created by God, and that goodness and peace and tranquility is the default. And then Darwin says, actually, the whole way the natural world functions is based on death and competition. You can imagine the implication of that being then, well, if that's the default, then, and the only thing that is there is the fight for survival. What matters? What's the meaning in life? Yeah, gets very existential, but that's the whole point. So now we can do some micro. Now we've got our context and we've got the basic themes that are very, very present at the time of the writing of Alice in Wonderland. So now we have to find quotations that sort of match up to those ideas. So this is a very, very fast-forwarded way of doing a text analysis. This work would be done over many weeks, I'm sure, if it was coursework. So often in Alice in Wonderland, the creatures Alice encounters, they refer to predator-prey dynamics. What I mean by that is when the animals talk about what their values are and what they're afraid of, they talk about being eaten and chased by other animals. They're genuinely afraid of being killed and predated on by other animals, just as it would realistically be. So basically Lewis Carroll presents a really kind of relatively to what children's literature was like at the time, he presents a very gritty concept of the natural world. For children's literature, I mean, it wasn't how they presented nature most of the time. Like I said, children's literature was they made it out to be a really peaceful, happy place where you could run with the rabbits and the foxes would be friends with the rabbits, and no one gets eaten or hurt, and if they do, it's definitely through freak accidents. But that's not Darwin's world. That's not Lewis Carroll's Wonderland's world. That's his Wonderland is quite chaotic and quite. It's very much to do with actual, predator-prey dynamics. Like I said, I've tried the roots of trees, I've tried banks, and I've tried hedges. The pigeon went on without attending to her. But those serpents, there's no pleasing them. So there's two really good points you can draw from this quote. One of them is, like I'm saying, the pigeon is concerned for her safety because she's being the serpents are a predator for her. The other point is that she has adapted to try and survive. So she says the roots of trees, banks, hedges. She's moving about to adapt to the environment. And this is the other point that this is the other sort of theme that is very, very relevant in terms of Darwinism, looking at this text in a in terms of where Darwin has influenced it. So we've got survival, survival of the fittest, competition, and then we've got adaptation. That's the other big deal. So also Alice, throughout the text, eats things, she drinks things, whatever, and she literally changes her body shape and size in order to move along with the story, in order to get into places, get out of places. And this takes influence from that idea of adaptation, that creatures have to adapt to survive, and then they'll mutate, and then they'll change. Very sort of scientific ideas for children's books at the time. And so it was indeed. She was now only 10 inches high, and her face brightened up at the thought that she was now the right size for going through the little door into that lovely garden. Yeah, it's too significant to ignore, really. This happens a lot. You have to take my word for it. These themes keep on being sort of evoked, and the presentation of the Wonderland is just very, very striking. Considering it's a piece of Victorian literature. It's very unique. So, lastly, there's plenty of other isolated references to Darwin's theories in the text. So, for example, near the beginning, Alice and all the animals are in the pool of tears, the salty pool of tears, and they swim. They all swim out together, and they all sort of wash up on the shore. And this is a very, very specific image. And there's been a couple of, critics have looked into this, and it really is suggestive of the idea of primordial soup, which is basically just the idea that all life came from the sea. All the animals swim out of the sea and they come up on the land, and they're all different and they all go their separate ways. That's suggestive of Darwin's theories of evolution. That's all we have time for right now. This is a great study. You should read this again and read it for the first time if you haven't already, and think about the creepy kind of Darwin influence that's in here, because it's quite fun. It's a nice new way to look at a children's classic. Anyway, thanks. Bye for now.